white light, blinding, insistent, even behind closed eyelids. Ethan tried to move, a twitch, anything, but his body was a dead weight. Where in hell was he? What had happened? The effort to even think about it, to grasp at the edges of reality, left him gasping, and he plunged back into the abyss. Slowly, like a reluctant dawn, consciousness crept back. Fragments of memory, sharp and jagged. Impact, the shriek of metal tearing metal. Agony. Then, nothing. An accident. That was it. He'd been driving home from a late meeting downtown. Rain slicked the streets of Manhattan. Headlights, impossibly bright, hurtling towards him out of the gloom. He'd jerked the wheel, tried to avoid the inevitable, but space and time had run out. Was he alive? By some miracle, he must be. But what about the other driver? He was in the ICU, the sterile hum and beeping of machines a constant, unsettling symphony. He could hear muffled sounds, distant voices. Then, clarity sharpened, and conversations drifted into focus. He recognized Claire's voice. His wife. She was on the phone, her tone hushed, strained. "Still no change," she said. "But they're saying to be hopeful." Hopeful? Ethan wanted to shout, to tell her he was here, in this broken body, fighting his way back. He wanted to reassure her, but his limbs were unresponsive, locked in place. Only his eyelids flickered, a tiny, desperate signal in the vast emptiness. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of pain and hazy awareness. He became more present, more attuned to the world around him. Someone was in the room again. Claire. He recognized her voice instantly, even before her words registered. She was on the phone again, her voice sharper now, laced with an edge of impatience. "Don't talk like that," she snapped, her voice low and venomous. "You don't get it. He might never wake up. And then the problem just vanishes." Problem? What problem could be solved by his death? "In that case," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "I'd inherit everything, the whole damn portfolio." Portfolio? What was she talking about? She listened for a moment, then a sharp affirmative reply. "Yeah, that could work, but I don't want to be the one holding the bag." Claire turned away from the window, and for the first time he felt her presence, a cold draft in the sterile air. She didn't notice his almost imperceptible eyelid twitch. She walked to his bedside, sat down heavily in the uncomfortable plastic chair. "Oh, Ethan," she sighed, the sound laced with false weariness. "If you only knew how exhausted I am, completely drained. You're up there, floating around somewhere, and I'm stuck down here, day after day, in this sterile hellhole. I even wonder if you can hear me. Do you, Ethan? Can you hear a word I'm saying?" She leaned closer, her gaze intense, probing, but not with affection. "Of course not. You're just lying there, like a vegetable. Well, while you're in this state, I'm going to tell you something. Something I've kept buried for far too long. If you were conscious, I'd never dare to breathe a word of it. But now it's like I'm just talking to the air, getting it off my chest. Though maybe, just maybe, it doesn't even matter anymore." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and anticipation. He tried to still it, afraid she might somehow sense his growing awareness, but Claire seemed lost in her own dark reverie. She paused, took a shaky breath, then plunged into the icy depths of her confession. "Do you remember how we met?" That summer in the Hamptons? That party at the Vanderbilt's place? You were standing by the pool, all brooding and mysterious, looking out at the ocean, and I made it my mission to talk to you. You were so charming back then, full of promises. You told me you were building this empire, this tech thing, and you were going to take over the world. Remember, Ethan? All those grand plans? She laughed, a short, brittle sound that held no humor. Yes, Ethan. But what you didn't know, what you never suspected, was that our meeting wasn't some chance encounter. I was there for someone else. I came to the Hamptons to see your brother, David. We had a thing back in college, and when you went off to conquer Wall Street, David and we stayed behind. We were supposed to be together. He was the one I wanted. He was the one I loved. Her voice hardened, the bitterness rising like bile. I went to that party to find him, to see if there was still something there. And then I saw you, standing there, all alone, radiating ambition and money. David was nowhere to be found, probably off chasing some other girl. He was always like that, wasn't he? Flighty, unreliable. She shifted in the chair, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the sterile hospital walls. So, I decided to redirect my attention. You were there, available, and you were a prize, weren't you? Marrying you was like winning the lottery, and David would be furious. That was part of the appeal, I admit it. Claire's voice dropped, becoming almost conspiratorial. When David realized things were getting serious between us, when he saw me actually falling for you, for your potential, he came crawling back. Of course he did. He always wanted what he couldn't have. Our reunions, they were intense, passionate, secret, of course. I was engaged to you, after all. But I couldn't resist him. Couldn't say no. He had this hold on me. Even when I walked down the aisle to marry you, Ethan, even then, I was still seeing David. And little Leo. Leo isn't yours. He's David's son. The words detonated in Ethan's mind, each syllable a shard of ice piercing his heart. Leo, his son, the boy he cherished, the light of his life. A lie, a fabrication. David's son, his own brother. The betrayal was a physical ache, a gaping wound in his soul. Claire, lost in her confession, continued her cruel narrative, seemingly unaware of the devastation she was wreaking. The doctors. They aren't painting a pretty picture, Ethan. They're saying, well, they're not saying you'll be walking out of here anytime soon, or ever. So, I decided to tell you the truth. Everything. Before it's too late. I didn't want you to die, and me to be left with this secret poisoning me. Consider it my final act of honesty. I hope wherever you end up you can understand. Maybe even forgive me. I never wanted to hurt you, Ethan. Not really. I was selfish and weak. And David was always so compelling. Anyway, I should go. Business to attend to. Forgive me if you can. I can't stay here any longer. I can, Ethan croaked, the sound barely audible, a ragged whisper torn from his throat. The word was a monumental effort, a victory hard won against the paralysis that held him captive. He fought with every ounce of his will to move, to turn his head, to break free from the prison of his own body. Slowly, agonizingly, His head shifted, a fraction of an inch at a time. He looked at Claire, his gaze locking onto hers. "I can't," he rasped again, the words laced with pain and fury. "Don't come back!" Claire recoiled as if he'd slapped her, her face contorting in a mask of outrage and wounded vanity. You were faking it? All this time? You deceived me. You manipulative bastard. You were the one pretending," Ethan choked out, each word a painful expulsion of breath. "Deceiving. Lying." "Forgive me, Ethan! Forgive me!" she screamed, the carefully constructed veneer of composure shattering into shards of hysteria. Claire dissolved into a torrent of tears, her sobs echoing through the sterile room. A nurse rushed into the room, her face a mask of professional annoyance. "What in God's name is going on here? He needs rest. This is intensive care. Visitors are restricted, and you're causing a major disturbance. You need to leave now." Claire backed away, still weeping, towards the door, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fury. The nurse turned her attention to Ethan, her demeanor instantly shifting to one of gentle concern. She leaned over him, her voice softening. "There now, Mr. Sterling. You're awake. That's wonderful news. You had a very close call. But you're in good hands. Dr. Ramirez is a miracle worker. He put you back together. You're going to be just fine." "Fine?" Ethan doubted that. His body might heal, but his life was shattered beyond repair. Ethan was transferred to a regular room, but the physical recovery was a grueling marathon, not a sprint. Weeks crawled by, then months. He was a shadow of his former self, weak, emaciated, haunted by Claire's venomous confession. Finally, months later, the day arrived when he could stand, shaky and unsteady, but upright. They allowed him to venture outside, to a small enclosed garden behind the hospital, a tiny oasis of green amidst the concrete jungle of the city. That's where he saw her. A young woman in a wheelchair, her face pale but luminous, her eyes holding a quiet strength that belied her fragile state. He caught her eye, offered a tentative smile. "Hi," he said, his voice still raspy from disuse. "Ethan?" "Isabel," she replied, her voice soft, melodic. They sat together in a shaded corner of the garden, talking, initially about the mundane realities of hospital life, the inedible food, the endless tests, the relentless noise. The next day, he sought her out again, and the day after that. The garden became their sanctuary, a shared space where they could escape the sterile confines of the hospital and find solace in each other's company. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing fragments of their lives, their hopes, and their fears. "How did this happen?" Ethan asked one afternoon, gesturing to the wheelchair. Isabel's smile faltered, her eyes clouding with a deep sadness. "An accident," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My fault. All my fault. I'm responsible. Do you understand? The man I hit, he didn't make it. He died. And I have to live with that. Every single day. It's a burden I'll carry forever." Were you speeding?" Ethan asked gently, sensing her profound guilt. Isabel explained. Her mother had called, panicked. Her son, little Max, barely a year old, was burning up with fever, his temperature spiking dangerously high. She'd called 911, waited agonizing minutes for the ambulance, then rushed out of her apartment, desperate to get to the hospital. Driving down the West Side Highway, frantic with worry, she'd tried to change lanes, misjudged the distance, lost control in the heavy traffic. Head-on collision, the seatbelt, the airbags, they'd saved her life miraculously. But her legs, shattered, multiple fractures, nerve damage. The doctors were optimistic. They said she'd walk again, eventually. But it would be a long road, requiring intensive rehabilitation, multiple surgeries, cutting-edge treatments. Where and when did it happen? Ethan asked, a strange tremor running through him, a premonition taking root in his mind. Isabel told him the date, the location on the West Side Highway. The details clicked into place with sickening precision. Ethan stared at her, a complex mix of emotions swirling within him. Shock, disbelief, a strange sense of fate. Slowly, a faint smile touched his lips, a smile that was both rueful and strangely accepting. "Isabel," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "It was me. You hit me. I'm the man you collided with." Isabel's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She stared at him, her face draining of color, shock and disbelief warring in her expression. You're... Ethan reached out, took her hand in his touch surprisingly firm, grounding her in the sudden whirlwind of revelation. "Yes," he said, his voice calm, reassuring. "It was me." He tried to comfort her, his own pain receding into the background, overshadowed by the raw anguish etched on her face. He asked about Max, her son, wanting to shift the focus away from the accident, away from the shared tragedy. Isabel explained that the ambulance had taken Max to the hospital that day. Her mother was with him. She, Isabel, had ended up here, consumed by guilt and fear, separated from her sick child, haunted by the knowledge that she had taken a life. "I destroyed your life," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. So sorry." Ethan, remembering Claire's cold-hearted confession, the casual cruelty of her betrayal, looked at Isabel, his gaze filled with a strange understanding. "Maybe," he said, his voice quiet, thoughtful. "Maybe it wasn't your fault. Maybe it wasn't anyone's fault. Maybe it was just meant to be. Maybe it had to happen. To bring us here. To bring us together." Unexpectedly, the carefully constructed walls around his heart crumbled. He poured out his story to Isabel, the story of Claire's deception, the lies, the devastating revelation about Leo. He told her about the divorce, already in motion, his lawyers handling the messy details. He was walking away from everything, the penthouse overlooking Central Park, the Hamptons estate, the trappings of wealth that had once seemed so important. He was letting Claire keep it all. All he had left was Sterling Tech, his company, the business he'd poured his life into. But what was next? He felt lost, adrift, unmoored. Isabel listened, her eyes filled with empathy, her hand gently squeezing his. "It'll be okay, Ethan," she said softly, her voice laced with a quiet strength that resonated deep within him. "You'll rebuild. You have your company. You're smart, driven. You can start over. You're not alone." Her own story tumbled out, a tale of resilience and heartbreak. How she'd been abandoned, left to fend for herself, pregnant and terrified, just weeks before Max was born. She'd been working 2 jobs, barely making ends meet, when she met a man, a charming architect named Greg. Widowed, he'd said, grieving the loss of his wife. They'd fallen in love, or so she'd thought. He'd moved in, promising her a future, a family. Then, one day, his deceased wife had walked through the door, very much alive and very, very angry. It turned out Greg was a serial liar, a con man who preyed on vulnerable women. Isabel had been devastated, humiliated, left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. "I believed him," she said, her voice thick with pain. "I trusted him, and he just used me, discarded me when his real wife showed up. I felt so foolish, so naive, but I survived. I always survive." She looked at Ethan, her gaze direct, unwavering. "We both will." "You're telling me this now?" Ethan murmured, a sense of connection, of shared experience blossoming between them. He said nothing more, but in the quiet garden, surrounded by the burgeoning life of spring, a fragile seed of hope began to sprout in the barren landscape of his heart. 2 years later. A balmy evening in late spring in New York City. Ethan, his arms overflowing with brightly colored balloons and stuffed animals, walked briskly down a tree-lined street in Greenwich Village, a wide smile illuminating his face. He was going home to his family, to Max, now a rambunctious 3-year-old, and to Isabel, his wife. Their life together had unfolded with a quiet grace, a slow, steady healing. They'd married in a small ceremony in Central Park, surrounded by a handful of close friends. Isabel had continued her therapy, her determination unwavering, and slowly, miraculously, she had regained her ability to walk, her steps still tentative, but her spirit soaring. A year ago, their daughter Lily had been born, completing their family circle. Ethan had rebuilt his life, brick by brick, finding a new sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. He'd sold the penthouse, moved downtown to a brownstone in the village, a warm, inviting space filled with laughter and love. Sterling Tech was thriving, but it no longer defined him. His family did. He reached his building, a charming brownstone bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, fumbling for his keys. As he was about to unlock the door, a hesitant voice stopped him. "Ethan?" He froze, a chill prickling his skin despite the warm evening air. Slowly, reluctantly, he turned. Standing across the street, under the flickering glow of a street lamp, was Claire. She looked thinner, older, her face etched with a weariness that went beyond mere physical exhaustion. "Ethan, wait," she pleaded, her voice strained, desperate. I need to talk to you, just for a minute." Ethan stared at her, a wave of weariness washing over him, a weariness that ran bone deep. He felt nothing for her now. No anger, no resentment, just a profound sense of indifference. "Claire," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "What do you want?" I came to apologize," she stammered, her voice trembling, tears welling up in her eyes. "For everything. For what I said in the hospital. For everything I did." Ethan sighed, a long, drawn-out breath that seemed to expel the last vestiges of the past. "Claire," he said, his voice softening slightly, not with compassion, but with resignation. "It's too late for apologies. It's been 2 years. My life is different now. I'm happy. For the first time in a long time, I'm truly happy. And you're not part of that life anymore. You made your choices, Claire, and so did I." He paused, then added, with a hint of finality, "If it helps you to hear it, then yes, I forgive you. But that's all I can give you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get home." He turned back to the door, inserting his key in the lock. He could feel Claire's gaze on his back, heavy with regret and unspoken longing. "Ethan!" she cried out, her voice breaking, a raw, desolate sound that echoed in the twilight. But the heavy oak door swung inward, and Ethan stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind him, shutting out the ghosts of the past. embracing the warmth and light of his present, his future. He left Claire standing alone on the sidewalk, a solitary figure shrouded in shadow, burdened by the weight of her choices, condemned to live with the consequences of her own making, forever outside the circle of his new life, a life he had almost lost but had ultimately, miraculously, found again.